Okay, hi, I'm Kerry Souter. I'm an abstract painter. Um, my background started, I went to art school back in the late 80s, early 90s. I studied textile design at art school, and um, after graduating, I continued to work a little bit. I was interested in dressmaking and fashion design, and I created some wedding dresses and special occasion wear. I always wanted to try and keep some form of art in my life, but over the years and having family and things like that, that sort of fell by the wayside. Um, so I started felt making around 15 years ago. I got interested through a friend of mine from art school, and it was 2D and 3D felt making. I like to make sort of landscape felt paintings, really, because it is like painting with wool. But also I was interested in the 3D design. I made some bags and other sort of sculptural pieces. Um, and so I exhibited my felt art and I sold it to a certain extent. But towards around 2000 there, it was having some, I was having some problems with it. It had its own limitations, and um, the final process of the felt making, wet felt making, it gets wet and you roll it and it shrinks, and so it changes the design, and that can sometimes bring about a really good product and sometimes not so much. It could be a bit disappointing, the outcome. And so I was beginning to feel like I wanted a bit more control over um, the finished product, and that was when I became interested in looking, going into painting again, which I'd done in the past, but just not on a professional level. So it was around about 2000, during the lockdown and the lovely spring that we had, that I started painting, and it just really took off from there. I just got really interested in it, and I think because painting is, there are just more opportunities for exhibiting with painting. It's a more sort of traditional art form than textiles, and people understand painting a bit more, I think. And so through Instagram, I've got an Instagram account, and things just grew from there. And a few galleries discovered me, like yourself, and that sort of is the background to date. Really, I've just been exhibiting since about 2021, and now I have my own studio. I started off painting at home, had a small room that I painted in, and then 2 years ago I moved to this studio, and I'm rapidly growing out of it now because it's just, my work's getting bigger, and yeah, so it's quite full at the moment, but it's been great having this space outside of the house, and it's a beautiful location as well. We're near the beach here, so that gives me inspiration every day when I come to work. So when I was felt making, in the beginning, I was working, producing mainly landscapes. A lot of it was commission work, really. And I would do landscapes, I would do some, lovely scenes with Highland cows and things like that, because people seem to like Highland cows and sheep. Um, but the actual, the product of the wool and the process of the felt making can create some really interesting textures, and you can add all sorts of materials into felt, and then with the shrinkage of the felt, it creates all these raised textures, and it can distort an image as well. And so over time the felt making became a more abstract form just by the nature of it, really. And that's what I really got interested in. I realised that I didn't really want to just create the landscapes as we see them, and that I was interested in a more abstract direction. And the same was true when I began painting. I had influence around that time. There were several artists online, and there's all sorts of online courses. And during lockdown, I was taking every free course available online. And there's lots of contemporary abstract artists that I'm really interested in, and not necessarily trying to work the way that they work, but they're just quite inspiring. And it was just quite eye-opening to me. And some of the free courses available, I felt were, value-wise, I learned more in that sort of short space of time than I did at art school back in the day. So yes, it's the abstract nature of it. I just think it gives me a lot more freedom, and the way that I work, the process of it combines with that abstract direction. So my artistic process is very experimental. That's the main thing that I enjoy about painting, really, is that you get to play with it, that you can try out all sorts of different techniques and colours and textures. And I work all my work is in acrylic, and there are so many acrylic mediums nowadays that you can use to get all sorts of different textures and effects with it. So I'm enjoying, finding out about all of them and developing my work that way. And in fact, this group of work has been quite strongly based on the different textures that I can create. I really want to go in that direction so that the surface of the paint is quite textured and bumpy and lines. And I know you're not meant to touch artworks, but I touch my artworks all the time and feel them, and I just love being able to it feels like they're a more sort of three-dimensional piece, really, than just flat paint. I use collage as well. I make my own collage papers, jelly print collage papers, and I use all sorts of different techniques and products to get those collage papers. In some of my work, more recent work, I like to think about how I can recycle as well. So I've been using some old dried up paint flakes and sprinkling them into the jelly prints, and so transferring them onto wet strength tissue paper, and then adding that onto the paintings. And so it just gives you different surfaces to work on, and the paint responds in different ways when it's on canvas or when it's on paper. So by doing that, then once so I'll start off a painting, and it's a really fun time at the beginning, because I'm not really thinking about what it's going to look like. I have no idea what it will look like in the end, really. My main aim at the beginning is just to get as much information and interest onto the canvas as possible, because that's when later on the exciting little surprises happen, because the more I can add on in the beginning. So I'll use lots of colour, maybe colours that are not going to be the predominant colour in the finished piece, but it's those, I can draw on the painting with water-based crayons, and mark it with, scratch into it and get lots of texture, so that in the later stages, when I'm sort of composing it a bit more and looking at the composition, and then the final paint marks that I make are affected by what's underneath, and that's what brings about the finished effect really, and that's where you get all the really nice surprises, because you apply something on top of something else, and all these layers help to bring forward those finished surfaces. In the end, what I like about it as well is that there's a history in the paintings, that they've been through they've really been through their own sort of story of development, and I tend to work on a group at a time, and so I'll keep them all at similar stages, and then try and finish them all together, so that it's not always possible to do that, but as much as I can in the space that I've got, I try to complete them together so that they all have a sort of a common theme around them, but each one gets its own sort of personal finish. So in terms of inspiration, I do sometimes use photographs. It tends to be places that I've visited at some point. I've got favourite places in my head, memories from childhood, holidays, and generally are places in Scotland, although not only Scotland. I do go out sketching, but I don't ever start work from a sketch as such, but I will do some sketching outdoors, and then I also work in my sketchbooks in the studio. I tend to use my sketchbooks just for experimenting and playing in. So I'll try out different colourways, and they're a safe place to just muck about really and test things out. But my inspiration tends to be focused, certainly at the moment, and it's always changing, but at the moment I'm really drawn to coastlines in Scotland. Around here we're on the Ayrshire coast, and I just love that area. If you can get a quiet, secluded spot there's lots of sort of cliffs around the coastline down here, and there's the ruined old Greenan Castle just down the road from here. And I just love that encounter of the different surfaces and textures that you see at the coastline. So you've got the water and the movement of the water, and then the sand and the rocks and all the life that grows on those rocks, and the marks that have been made over, so many years. So there's lots of texture going on there. Obviously the colours as well, but my paintings, the colours are never sort of directly taken from nature. They can, I can use all sorts of colours. So the colours that I use in my paintings, I don't start off, I don't have a definite colour palette in mind. Sometimes I will, sometimes I'll use a limited palette in a group of paintings, but I quickly become quite bored of that. So I've tried several times to think, right, this group of work is going to be this particular colour palette, and it just doesn't work that way. It has to be, I have to have the freedom in it, I think, just to experiment as I go. That's just part of the process. I tend not to do commissions for that very reason, because I like to be free to let the painting go in whichever direction it seems to be taking its own path. And quite often my paintings they start off one way and end up completely different to how I could ever have imagined. And I follow on from that's what instructs me for the next group of work, because it's often sort of an accidental surprise that leads me to find something that I like, that then I'll use in later paint, or try to use in later paintings, and then they don't turn out that way either, and it grows and moves on from that. So the colour palettes, I get into trouble from my children a lot for just using blues and greens all the time, but that's the colours that kind of drawn to. But I just love colour, and that's the thing that is so much fun in the painting process, is just seeing colours used together, and it's just finding that combination and that feeling that you get when mixing paint together and blending them together and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And it's very much a way of feeling my way through the paintings. I can't really explain in any other way than I feel what needs to be done, and I know the rules around colour mixing and composition and all that. What I found in the past is that when I try to think too much about the painting, I can produce a competent enough painting, but when it works best is when I'm not thinking and I'm just feeling the painting, and I feel the colours that work best, and I feel the way the composition's going, and that's generally when it works. And so the colour selection tends to be quite instinctive, and again I can start off with a colour palette in mind, but it can take me in all directions really, and that's the fun part of it, is just mixing it up and seeing how you can surprise yourself with it really. I have to keep reminding myself, especially when I'm trying to work on a lot of paintings like this for a particular event, and like the solo show I'm going to be having, and it can become like a bit of a job, that I've got all this work to produce. But the reason that I'm doing it is because it's so much fun, and just the actual process of making the paintings is the brilliant part, and that's the bit that I love. And some occasionally, you do get a bit off track, and then things, and it comes out in the painting as well. You can tell when I've been trying too hard and trying to make something work, whether it's the colour or the composition, it just doesn't work, and sometimes you need a break from that, and then just to come back fresh and just mess things up again. And sometimes when a painting's not working, it's really good to actively not destroy it, but disrupt it. I can get too precious, which I think, I'm not alone in that when it comes to painters, but I can get too precious on a particular area or something that I like, and I'll try and paint around it and try and make it work, and because I really like that bit and I want it to stay as part of the painting, and inevitably it always ends up getting covered up because it just doesn't work that way once you get too precious about anything. So it's good to come in and disrupt it, and that can be with a different colour, just going, covering up a whole area or something, and it's just a fresh start, and it often resolves itself really quickly after that. It's strange because it feels like I'm going back to square one with a painting, but what I find is it's all the layers underneath, they're still there. You can play with them. You can. My process is an awful waste of paint because I tend to put paint on and take paint off, and it feels a bit like, some days it feels like I'm wiping more paint off and putting it in the bin than putting paint on the canvas. But it's a very emotional process, and it really is responsive to the way I'm feeling about it. I find I don't have to be in a good frame of mind, and I do believe that you have to come in and I try to get into the studio every day, and I'm not always feeling like painting every day, but I can make myself feel like painting, and by getting into that frame of mind, and it's the painting that puts me in a good mood really, and gets me into that frame of mind. So I try and come into the studio every day, at least every weekday, and I found that doing that really benefits my practice. You know, I can see it having a benefit in my work, in my life, in everything. It's if I'm away from the studio for too long now. For example, I haven't painted since Thursday last week, and this is now Monday, and I can feel that itchiness. I need to get back to it. I need to try. It's a form of sort of meditation really for me. It's just something that's become part of my daily life now, and it just helps me in other areas of my life, you know, and having that time in the studio is really beneficial for me as a person, but also for my work. So yes, it's important for me to come in every day, even if it's just a short space of time. I can do different types of work depending on how long I've got. You know, sometimes it's just preparing things in the studio, and then I have peace of mind that I know that I'm ready to go, you know, the next day. And sometimes it's just coming in, and I spend a lot of time just looking at the work, maybe not actually putting any paint on canvas, but making decisions about what stages I'm at and what needs to be done next. And that can just settle my mind as well for the following day and what I'm going to do. Because particularly when I'm on a deadline for a project or something, that can be a bit of a hindrance. You know, there's always this pressure and feeling like I've got to be doing something all the time. But a lot of the process is looking and, you know, just studying the painting and deciding what it needs and what I like, what I want to keep and what I want to change. So it's a balance of the two, because I don't want to spend too long, because in activity you can think all you like about a painting and what you should do with it, but until you start working on it, that's when the things happen. You can't predict those surprises that happen once you start painting. So once I start painting. So a daily practice is important, and just it helps to keep me connected to the work that I'm doing. It's good to have breaks away from it and come back to it with fresh eyes, but I feel just having the continuity of working every day keeps me connected keeps my mind in sort of a flow of what I'm doing with each piece. So that's what I try to do. Well, I was never very good at art history when I was at art school. Influences in my art are, I would say, are mainly contemporary artists, and I've discovered an American artist, Nicholas Wilton, who has a big art course. It's called Art to Life, and his course is called the Creative Visionary Programme, CVP, which I haven't actually done, but the full paid course, but he does a lot of free workshops and things, and his teaching really, really spoke to me. Just his attitude towards painting, and it's called Art to Life. And he talks about how art is part of your life, and life is your art as well, and how connected it all is. And that's what I've really felt, that, you know, I don't think I ever realised before how connected art is to my life and how important it is. And maybe it's an age thing. As you grow older and you start to look for the meanings in things, but I recognise now how important it is to be creative every day. And I don't do yoga or meditation or anything like that, but for me, working in the studio is my meditation. It's where I work things out. It's where I go to be happy. It's where I go if I'm a bit unhappy. And I always feel better after, being in the studio and painting. And I think being creative in any way helps you to look at the world in a different way as well. And you start noticing, it's about noticing and observing things, and that's your entire surroundings. Wherever you go, wherever I go, I'm on the lookout for what's around me and noticing the colours and the textures and just feeling the space in the environment. I am particularly interested, more in landscapes, I suppose. But so I find that where when I'm out in the landscape, I'm not thinking about how it would look in a painting, but I'm observing it and trying to make an imprint in my mind for future reference. I suppose that's what where my inspiration comes from.